My name is Alex Torres, and I'll be doing my policy presentation on term limits in California and Maine. So first of all, California has one of the most professional legislatures out of any state. They have a full-time legislature. The term limit law in California prohibits legislators from ever serving again once they reach the term limit. And term limits didn't create a citizen legislature, and instead they're just more likely to have experience in local government. There's a lot of local governments in California. Legislatures are afraid to antagonize each other, so fewer bills are screened out, and instead they're thoroughly amended in the Senate floor, and their contents are thoroughly changed. California is actually an outlier. Most states, once they implement term limits, that their legislatures actually write shorter and more simple bills, but in California they write longer and more complex ones. And big reason for this is that legislators in California have large and experienced staffs, and also because they have experience in local government. And the legislature is also significantly weaker than the executive branch and the governor, and they provide less oversight. So they're a lot less likely to challenge the governor's budget. Also, leadership positions are more likely to be given to freshman members. There haven't been any big changes to lobbying. The only change really is that lobbyists have to reintroduce themselves more often because of turnover rates, and before they would already know uh, the district legislators. In 2012, Prop 28 passed. It actually overall restricted or eased restrictions on term limits. It allowed legislators to split their time between the chambers. So before, they were limited to 6 years in the Assembly and 8 years in the Senate. But now it's capped at 12 years total instead of 14, and they can just choose to split that time however they want. When it comes to Maine, Maine has a part-time citizen legislature. They actually have one of the least professional legislatures in the country. Also, their term limits law only applies to consecutive terms, so they can just wait out an election cycle, or they can just run for office in the other house, like the Senate, if they were previously serving in the House. Maine is mostly rural also. Term limits in Maine also haven't increased the amount of citizen legislators. Leaders are less experienced also, just like in California, but they're actually more experienced in the Senate. But overall, leadership roles are weaker because turnover rates are high, and everyone is trying to posture for that leadership role. Committees are also weak because they're not any more knowledgeable than any of the other members. Lobbying, it's the same story as in California. It's just an inconvenience because they have to reintroduce themselves to the legislators. And of course, the legislator has become weaker, executive branch has become stronger. Legislators are less likely to understand the budget process and to change the governor's budget, and they don't know what their predecessors did, and so they write similar bills to ones that have already failed. Solutions uh, are more likely to be simple, even if the problem is complex, because the legislators are less experienced. The executives, the lead policymaker, and the bureaucracy are viewed as the experts now. And Maine legislators write shorter and less complex bills, which is in line with how it is in most states, except for California. So the conclusions are that term limits make legislators weaker, executive branch stronger. They don't bring about citizen legislators. They aren't revolutionary. They don't bring big changes. It doesn't change lobbying all that much, and it does bring about inexperienced legislatures, and they're more short-sighted. Just thinking about the short term, since they only have a limited amount of time in office. Some recommendations I would have is that training initiatives are important for states that want term limits. Some of those training initiatives would involve like teaching legislators how to write bills, teaching them about the legislative rules, committee rules and procedure, and how to provide oversight on the executive branch. Um, if states want to lessen restrictions on term limits, they'll have to offer clever concessions to voters, like in California. California, like how I said earlier, they lowered the amount of years to 12 instead of 14, the term limits, but they allowed legislators to split their time between the two chambers however they want.